So box.
Hi, I'm Rochelle, and you're watching or listening to Box F1 Pod. Today we're going to be debriefing the Brazilian Grand Prix, and what the fuck? I feel like I've lived about several decades throughout this race. I feel like tired. I feel like I was racing and I wasn't. It just felt like the longest experience of my entire life. Don't know what happened. Insane weekend. Like, I was just overwhelmed nonstop. The entire weekend, I was just overwhelmed. And the race was just like so much overstimulation. I literally could not function. I struggled. And therefore, I feel like this episode will reflect that struggle, because how the fuck do I talk about this? Don't find me. I'm gonna do my best. I've tried my very, very best to organize this, but I will admit it's not great. So you're just gonna go along on this journey with me. But while I talk about it, I'm going to be gonna attempt to pronounce this, pão de queijo. I think you say the J in Portuguese, pão de queijo. Brazilian cheese bread, if you've ever had it. It's literally my favorite thing in the world. I think I made it a couple of years ago for the Brazilian Grand Prix. Literally, this could be my main food group, honestly. If you're gluten-free, it's gluten-free. It's not dairy-free though, so it's very much reliant on cheese. So I'm gonna be making that while I discuss the most insane weekend of my entire life. So without further ado, let's kick off the digital warm-up. Lap 1, F1 news. While I do F1 news, I'm going to pour all of the things that need to come to a boil into the pot. Last week in Mexico, Charles accidentally said fuck, like I've just said like 8 times during the intro, but how else are you supposed to describe this race? I'm shocked none of them said it in their interviews. Charles accidentally said fuck during the press conference, and it was to describe like when he slightly went off track, and Lando ended up overtaking him, and he was like, and I was just like, fuck. And then he starts giggling because everyone around him is giggling. And then he realizes why they're giggling. It's because he's about to get in trouble. And he's like, oh no, I don't want to join Max, which made me laugh. Lucky for him, the FIA doesn't feel like giving out the same punishment to every single person. They're very much like, everyone deserves their own custom punishment. So while Max got fined with some community service, Charles did not have to suffer the same fate. He, in fact, got just a $10,000 fine. But it's okay because he only has to pay $5,000 up front, and the rest will get issued in a year's time, assuming he breaks the rule again. Not entirely sure which one is worse, if I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm putting the milk, oil, and water and salt to boil, and then I'm gonna pour it into the tapioca flour. But it was really funny when he said it, because the whole room started giggling when he said fuck and then realized what was going on. And then there's a picture of him after the press conference where he's getting reprimanded by like a man in a dress shirt and a vest, which is clearly FIA uniform. He's getting like a very stern talking to, and he looks like low-key ashamed. He's like scratching his head and he's like, oh, sorry. I just think it's like, first of all, we waited quite a few days for the result of his punishment, and he got fined $10,000. Like I said, and then the 5K is on hold, assuming he doesn't, and he won't get fined the other 5,000, assuming he doesn't say a swear word again in a press conference. But I'm like a little confused, like, why? Like, I assume they set the precedent with Max in terms of the punishment for swearing in a press conference. Like, they said the same word. I guess Max said the car was fucked, and Charles said, and I was like, fuck. So I guess it's different usages of the same word. And I don't know if that's where the difference in punishment comes from, but for some peculiar reason, the same word in the same location in the same like scenario results in 2 entirely different punishments. And I just like, I don't know why. And I also don't know which one is worse. Like, Is it worse to get fined $5,000 freaking dollars, or is it worse to get community service? Because on the one hand, Max is never doing the community service. I don't know how fines work. I don't think we all get like alerted when someone has paid their fine, but I assume that Charles does have to pay his $5,000 fine, which I guess in that situation the fine is worse. But like for some reason the community service feels more shameful. Like it feels more like offensive to assign Max Verstappen community service versus just a fine, even though I feel like it's definitely worse. It's 100% worse to have to pay $5,000 for saying fuck. That's an expensive swear word. That's like a hard thing to like, especially when you're frustrated, which is what they are usually in press conferences. Or like, he was literally asked, how did you feel? What were you thinking when you went off track? And Charles was like, well, I was thinking fuck. Makes sense. I don't know. I think it's dumb. But anyway, moving on, as president of the Drivers Grand Prix Association, or whatever it's called, George Russell is now, I guess, officially the spokesperson for what the drivers decide in meetings. And he mentioned that, so after Austin, and the weird thing with Max and Lando and everyone was like, we need better, more clear, we need to change the rules, basically. All the drivers voted, and apparently 19 out of 20 drivers agreed that the rule needs to be changed, assuming it's incorrect. And so he said that the punishments that Max received in Mexico were a result of that decision. But he did clearly very intentionally specify that only 19 out of 20 drivers agreed. So of course, natural follow-up question to that is who didn't agree? And everyone automatically assumes it's Max, when I think it's very obvious it's not, because Max has been one of the most vocal people about changing the rules to be more clear and more precise. He's basically been like very open about him exploiting the loopholes in the rules and saying that the FIA should be much more clear in how they assign punishments and what the rule actually is. So like he was very willing to exploit the rule as it existed, but Max also feels like a very like rule-abiding person. So I just feel like there's literally no way he voted against it. I have a feeling it's someone who's like out next year or like super old. I don't know. I feel like Kevin Magnussen, and I've seen a lot of people talk about this, and I kind of agree that I kind of feel like Kevin Magnussen might have just done it for the bands. Like, he's not competing next year. He loves to cause chaos. It kind of tracks that he'd be like, I vote against this, even though he knows it's going to pass, which is probably why he voted against it. I feel like if it was like 10-9, he wouldn't have risked it or something like that. But like 19-20, when every single driver voted yes, he's probably like, actually, I'll vote no, just for the shits and giggles. Wow, this would be a very expensive episode if I was getting fined for every swear word. Another thing that's come out in the last couple of days is that there seems to be a Instagram for the Drivers Grand Prix Association, whatever it's called. I keep forgetting the actual name, which obviously George organized, and all the drivers have followed it pretty much. And everyone's just curious what it's going to be used for. Anyway, moving on, curious to see what that's for. And I really hope someone asks him, because I feel like this is prime information. Further on in F1 news, we're going to talk about the rumors. Oh my God, I can't remember the quote. If anyone watches Salt Lake City, what'd you say? The rumors, the lies. Did she say lies? Whatever. She said something about rumors. There's a rumor that Franco is going to go to RB with Yuki, but there's also a rumor that Franco is going to Red Bull. But then there's another rumor that Franco is staying at Williams and Carlos is going to go to Red Bull. All fascinating rumors. I think it was definitely fueled by the fact that Christian Horner was seen leaving the Williams hospitality, and everyone's like, well, see, he was clearly offering Franco a seat. One of the comments is like, he was obviously wishing his condolences for the passing of Franco's grandfather. Which, by the way, yes, Franco's grandfather did pass this weekend, and there was a lot of really sad videos of him like leaving the hospitality crying. Like, it was clearly a very difficult weekend for him. track stuff aside. But I just found it really funny that anyone thought that Christian Horner was actually going there to pay his condolences to Franco when they probably not met prior to this. All right, lap 2, off-duty F1. So Carlos celebrated his post-Mexico GP win because obviously his entire family was there. He went on the whole thing, how this was the first time his mother has seen him won and how it makes him so happy. So he went out to celebrate with his whole family, including Kako, our fave. And there were some videos posted about him. Lando was there with his family celebrating. They had a whole mariachi band. They were like in a private room at a restaurant. So in addition to the restaurant where they also had like a mariachi band and it was like, it looked super fun. After the restaurant, he went out to like a club with, there's a cute video of him reminding Rebecca to go put on a sweater. She's like, it's gonna be warm in there. He's like, no, you must have a sweater. And she's like, but it's gonna be warm in the club. And he's like, no, you must get the sweater, go get your sweater. So he waited for her to go get her sweater. And they were like partying in the club. He's never looked more like rich guy gone wild, very old money. Someone said to me this weekend that Carlos has always given them a pretentious vibe. And I like don't get that. Besides his aesthetic and the way he dresses, he doesn't seem pretentious to me, but at all. But I think he just gives off like an old money vibe, and that's what people are feeding off of. But so he went to this club, and then there were videos of him partying at the club, and then there were videos of him leaving the club. And by the way, his father went to the club with him. Just putting that out there, that I think that's insane. And kudos to Carlos Sr. for having the stamina for that. I don't have the stamina for that, and I'm Carlos's age. So he was asked about it during an interview, because obviously we saw all this footage, and it was obviously fan-filmed footage. And he said, we went out to a club, as you guys have probably seen on social media, because nowadays you can't do anything without being posted on social media. It was a bit annoying to have 15 cameras on you while having a fun time, which from here, I would like to recommend people leave phones aside when you're having a good time. Don't be that guy on a camera filming annoyingly. Just enjoy the party. Shake hands with me if you want. Give me the congratulations. Come and join me and party, but keep your phone in your pocket if you want to be seen as welcome. And I totally get that. And I fully agree with him. I do understand the fans who wanted to film with him and be like, oh my God, I saw Carlos. And I think it's really funny because from like a fan POV, you always think you're being subtle. But like, I guess as a celebrity, they always know. They have like a sixth sense about people filming them. Anyway, there was another interview that happened with Pierre on a podcast, and I saw the story that he told on the interview before I saw the actual interview. And basically the story he told was about how one time this girl wrote him a letter propositioning him and Charles to get in a relationship with her. So to both of them and then her. And like the way she wanted him to indicate that he was interested was by winking during his Sky interview to show his interest. And he was like, I made sure to keep my eyes wide open that whole time. And the whole story was really funny until I watched where it came from. And he told the interview on a podcast that was hosted by like literally two little boys. They were like 11 or 12. And like Pierre, hilarious story. Not the time or place. Like, I was watching these boys' reactions. They're trying to react all cool and stuff, but they're probably like, what does this mean? I'm about to add eggs to this dough, and I'm gonna crack them based on, I don't know if anyone's seen this, but there's a new movie called We Live in Time with Florence Pugh and Andrew Garfield. And one of the things she says in the movie is that you always crack your eggs on a flat surface. So you know what? No more cracking on the side of this bowl. I'm cracking directly on this flat surface, which is actually what I've been doing for the last week since I saw the film. All right, moving on. Liam Lawson he is now on his third week of fighting Spanish-speaking drivers for literally no reason. I don't know where this is coming from or why he's decided that these are the people to have beef with, but he has beef with Fernando and Checo. And then in another interview this week, Charles clarified, do you remember last week where I was like, everyone's talking about Charles being mad at Carlos, and I feel like he has absolutely no reason to be mad at Carlos, so I don't understand why this is happening, but like, I guess there was this weird moment between them. Charles is clarifying on that moment, and he was like, I hate what's going on online right now. It sounds like I'm really pissed at Carlos, judged by like a half a second of me passing by him, even though I just congratulated him like 2 minutes earlier. I was not mad at him, especially because I actually did not know what he had said on the radio at the beginning of the race. So like the moment that everyone thought I was mad at him for, and was ignoring him for, I didn't even know that happened. And I also was not mad about it. So he's just like, this is stupid. And he's like, I wish people would stop making up stupid things. So I feel vindicated because I definitely did not believe that he was mad, and I couldn't understand why he would be mad. All right, lap 3, trackside at Interlagos. So in case you didn't watch, Kevin Magnussen got like a really bad stomach flu, so he was absent the entire weekend. Ollie Bierman took his place for the weekend, and poor fucking Ollie Bierman. This was not the race I think he wanted to replace Kevin for, but I think Kevin was also relieved he was not part of this race. Also, Fernando Alonso also had the stomach flu, but he only missed media day. So he was back for the actual race, though I think he probably also regrets it. He was back for not just the actual race, but for any racing in general. All right, so I've mixed the egg in, and I'm gonna add the cheese slowly. Lewis got to drive Senna's car, which was really wholesome. I know he has a really good relationship with Senna's family, and I think he's their driver of choice for these things. Rebecca Andrade, the Brazilian Olympic gymnast who won silver, she got to wave the checkered flag, so she was there. That was really cool. So in the media day press conferences before the race, they've like really like skimmed down, but it was Lewis, Franco Colapinto, and Lance. Lance was so checked out this entire weekend. Like, it's almost no surprise how his race went. And Franco was just fangirling over Lewis the whole time. And I think Lewis really likes him. Lewis loves mentorship like opportunities. And I think Franco was like, oh my God, I'm next to Lewis Hamilton. He actually posted a hilarious Instagram grid post of him, like someone had captured him walking behind Lewis and like trying to sneak a photo of him. And then it was like that. And then the next slide was him sitting next to him at the press conference. And Franco's so good at social, and Franco's just so charming and like lovely. He's just lovely. He's got such a long career ahead of him, and I think he's so hard to dislike. Like, Liam Lawson has already made so many enemies. Franco has made 0. Franco has exclusively made best friends, and I just love that for him. But Sebastian Vettel was there. He hosted an event in tribute to Senna with all the drivers, and it was so cute. There were some drivers missing. I can't remember everyone who was missing, but the ones I do remember was Red Bull, because they had been booked for different media things at that time, and everyone was like, of course Red Bull's not present, like they don't care about Senna, like please. But there was like this giant helmet in the middle of the track that it basically looked like a giant piñata, but like they could walk into it. It wasn't a piñata. It just looked like a piñata from the outside. And they all took pictures in there. Seb took pictures with all the drivers, and he's like, let's do fun with the new drivers. Or I assume he said that because there was a picture of him with all the little baby drivers, and it was really cute. And he also did, I think they did like a track walk through Brazil, and it was really cute because there's like a video, I think F1 actually posted it, of him like walking the track and like beckoning people to follow him, and it's like all the drivers just like trailing behind him, and it's like Seb's leading a field trip, and it was just really cute. Finally, there was a group of fans watching the race outside of the track, and there were like there's giant TVs outside of the track. And there was like a zoom in on Carlos taking off his balaclava. And the way the girls shrieked was hilarious. Like, it was just like a deafening scream as soon as he like took off the balaclava and like shook his hair out. It was hilarious. It was very funny. Carlos is for the girls, for sure. Anyway, with that, we conclude our digital warm-up. On to the race rhyme. OMG, what a weekend in Brazil. This weekend literally had no chill. First, the sprint race, which was super fun until Oscar had to give Lando first. Then with quali on Sunday, drivers had to get up at like 7 a.m. and they were like, this is absurd. Then quali itself had like 5 red flags and non-stop incidents each session. And this was after we waited for the rain to stop pouring with such aggression. When it was finally time for the lights to go out and for them to all go, Lance beached himself on the formation lap and was like, I'm a pass. You have fun though. Then we had some breaching of starting procedure and the FAA being like, we'll deal with this at our leisure. The sequence of events that followed the lights finally going out were so absurd and chaotic, I'm not really sure what to talk about. The pavement was bumpy, so backs were hurting from all the extra motion. Not to mention there was more water on that track than the damn Atlantic Ocean. The least shocking thing that happened all day was that Lando lost the start to George. I know, right? No way. Nico Hülkenberg accidentally went off track, issuing a VSC. He got a little pushback onto the track, which got him disqualified from this Grand Prix. Lando and George pitted at the worst time, which messed up their track positions for real. Then there was a safety car, just because, before it was followed by a red flag, bringing a short pause to this whole ordeal. That was caused by Franco crashing into the wall, which means his race was finito. This was a tough weekend for him, and this race was a little too much for Franco Colapinto. Lined up, rolling start, and action. Just kidding. Let's bring out another safety car. That seems fitting. This time it's Carlos Sainz in the barriers. He's out of the race, and it's a blow. Because yeah, what the fuck are these inters, Ricky? Hello? By the way, I forgot to tell you that Max went from P17 to P6 before the first half of the race was done. And by this point, he's sandwiched between 2 Alpines gunning for number 1. When we finally restart, there's nothing Ocon can do because here comes Max doing what only he can do. And after a few more spins and slips and slides all around the track, but nothing too stunning, Max finally brings it home, followed by none other than 2 Alpines, which literally no one saw coming. Max has finally broken his dry spell, and we all get to hear the Dutch national anthem once more. And Pierre and Gasly mended a relationship we all thought there was no hope to restore. Next up, we're headed to Vegas. Let's pray for a boring, dry race. Please, nothing outrageous. Okay, on to analysis. So we're gonna start with sprint, and I'm gonna be honest, I can do a whole episode on sprint. So it's gonna be short because there's just too much to talk about, and it's easier to not talk about it. If you know what I mean. So during the race, Oscar got pole. During quali, Oscar got pole position, and he actually was leading most of the race. But then towards the end, he got team orders to let Lando through. And so the top 3 ended up being Lando, Oscar, and Charles because, they would have been the top 3 anyway, but Oscar had to let Lando through because of, the championship. And he did, no problem. I think there should have been a problem, but there was no problem on his end. He just let him through. And then during the post-sprint press conference, one of the journalists was asking a question and she started by saying, "First of all, Oscar, I want to say congratulations on your win." And it was so funny. Oscar went, I don't know what I won, but thanks. And Lando and Charles are both cackling. And then during his next answer, Lando was like, "By the way, I don't like winning like this, and I'm glad you congratulated Oscar because he won the race." Team orders are super awkward. Moving on to quali, it was raining so hard they had to postpone. Oh my God, every time I say it sounds incorrect. They had to postpone quali to Sunday morning. And it was at 7:30 a.m. local time because obviously the race was later that day and they had to move everything around. The funniest thing to me was how upset the drivers were for having to get up that early. And at first I was like, a 7:30 a.m. call time is not that bad. But then I remembered they actually had to be at the track probably closer to 5 a.m. Because it's not they get in the car and go. There's some other team stuff they have to do. I still thought they were being a bit dramatic about it, but it was I get it a bit more. At first I was like 7:30 is like really late. But yeah, if they had to be on track by 5 a.m., I think at one point Pierre was like, my eyes were still closed. Like that's a bit dramatic, but like I get it. Quali was insane. There were 5 red flags, and therefore 5 like major crashes. Franco, Alex, Carlos, Fernando, and Lance. Okay, so now I'm gonna put them in the oven and they're gonna be in there for... Both Fernando and Alex crashed out in Q3, which left only like 3 minutes for people to set a time. And Max, by the way, ended up qualifying in 12th, which happened because there was another red flag and apparently there was like a 50-second gap between, not 50-second, but there was a really big gap between the crash happening and the red flag being issued, and people were complaining that it was in favor of McLaren, and Max was definitely not implying that, but he was definitely saying that like it shouldn't have been that long to wait. And he also said in the post-race press conference that he was so angry after qualifying that he was like about to like break half the garage, but he didn't, obviously. But he also said that anger probably motivated him to perform as well as he did. And then, but he also gave up on fighting it. Like he said it in his first few interviews, he's like, you know what? I don't give a fuck anymore. Like I just do not care. And he, by the way, had a 5-place grid penalty because of engine changes. So he ended up starting in P17, even though he qualified P12. Alex crashed also. He was one of the P3 crashers, and his car was not going to be fixed in time for the race because obviously it's all on the same day. And it's like a lot of pressure for the engineers, especially for like Williams, for example, where both Franco and Alex crashed. So it's like double the work. I know they have their own set of engineers, but it's still like a lot of work. And I feel like Alex's car was like beyond repair. So they like knew from the beginning. The only open-ended question I have, and if any of you have the answer, would love to hear it, but I don't understand why Alex, who ended up qualifying 7th, the spot was left blank on the grid. Like they left that part blank, and I just don't really understand why. Do you know what I mean? Like usually people move up, no? Yuki got P3, which was very exciting, and also was absolutely hilarious to see the top 3 line up for their picture for the qualifying whatever. Because it was literally like, you know, where it's like George is like super, super tall, and then Lando is like a little shorter than, like you think Lando's short, but then you put him next to Yuki and he's like tall. During one of the breaks, by the way, like, cause there was a lot of breaks cause it was still pretty wet, they were showing like fun facts about now I'm like confused if it was during the sprint or during qualifying. I think it was during qualifying. Or maybe it was during the original qualifying while they were waiting. It's all meshed in my head. This weekend has been crazy. But during one of the breaks, waiting for the rain to pause, they were showing like fun facts about the team principals, and they showed something about James Vowles, who obviously was super boring, which I used to find endearing. Not anymore. And they showed something about Fred, and Fred said that he loved ice cream. Like his favorite food, ice cream. And then it said what he would be doing if he was an F1 team principal. And he said running an ice cream shop. And it made me laugh. During the original qualifying, Stefano was doing an interview about why they were canceling qualifying. And Lewis literally interrupted his interview mid-recording and was like, hey, if you give us better wet tires and then better tire blankets, we could be racing right now. And Stefano was like, haha, okay. Lewis was also recording a lot of his cute aesthetic videos of the rain during the qualifying, to the point where Mercedes stole his video of him, like he was like squatting in a puddle, like filming the rain coming down. Mercedes stole the video and posted it on their own account. And Sauber did like a pretend weather forecast. Everyone was doing like crazy shit. Everyone was so bored, and it was like really fun. Someone started floating rubber ducks. I can't remember who it was, but like in the puddles, they were floating rubber ducks. Which reminds me, tell me, Harry, what exactly is the function of a rubber duck? Oh, all the Harry Potter fans. Anyway, so the starting grid is as follows. Lando, George, Yuki, Ocon, Lawson, Charles, Alex, who's not racing, just a blank space, Oscar, Alonso, Stroll, Bottas, Checo, Pierre, Lewis, Ollie, Franco, Max, Nico, Guan Yu, and Carlos. Max was penalized 5 positions for use of additional power unit elements, which is why he started in P17 instead of P12. And Carlos was required to start from the pit lane after additional power units and gearbox elements were used. So before I head into the race, I'm going to freeze these. So I have some of them in the oven, and then the rest of these I'm gonna freeze so I can bake at a later time because I'm obviously not gonna eat all of them right now. BRB. All right, race. So again, this was the most chaotic experience of my entire life, and case in point of it being the most chaotic experience of my entire life, there was drama before the race even started. So during the formation lap, Lance managed to beach himself. He had gone off the track during the formation lap, lost it on the brakes or something, and just like spun out. He tried to reverse it, and for some reason reversed himself onto the gravel. So he's beached. And it's really sad because engineers just worked super hard to fix this car. Like in that amount of time, they had like a couple hours. There is the theory that Lance did it on purpose after seeing the conditions of the track. He's like, not today. The conditions were insane, but also like Lance, suck it up. Okay, so given the fact that Lance is beached in the formation lap, there is an aborted start. And for some reason, Lando decides that an aborted start means he needs to do another formation lap, which is actually not the protocol, but at all. And so no one actually knows why Lando's just gone off, but George is like, well, if he's going, I'm going. So Lando went off, and then George went off, and then Yuki and Lee were like, okay, I guess. So they went off. But like half the track, the rest of the track is still like standing there. And then Pierre and Ollie Bierman drove around the cars parked in front to do their formation lap, but everyone still stayed in place. And then they played Max's radio, who was like, this isn't protocol. And his engineer was like, yeah, they've breached protocol. And Max eventually starts moving, but it's because he's told to move. And his engineer's GP's like all this confusion was caused by the front of the grid. And Max did the right thing by staying still. So basically, the rule is when there is an aborted start, you stay in place and your engineers and like the whole team come and like to your car, basically. But for some reason, I don't know if we ever discovered why, but Lando decided he should move forward. I don't know if he was told to do that. I don't know if it was just a whim, but he moved forward, which sort of triggered everyone else to move forward, or like some people. And eventually the FIA was like, well, if they're moving forward, I guess everyone needs to do a formation lap. So they did that. Then they stopped. The engineers came out, blah, 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 blah. And then when they did another formation lap before starting again, because of that, we ended up only having like 69 official laps in the race because we had like double the formation laps. So at the beginning of the race, Lando ended up being noted for starting procedure infringement or something like that. In the beginning, it was just Lando. And then the FIA added on George, Liam, and Yuki. And as everyone was trying to figure out if Lando broke the rules or not, by the way, during this time, and one of the commentators was like, you look at the rules, I'll look at the clouds, because there were a lot of clouds. And Lando broke the rules, and it was just all very dramatic, and it was very like foreshadowing of what was to come, because there were a lot of rules broken, and there were a lot of clouds. And then the commentator goes, it is unprecedented for the man on pole to just drive off during an aborted start. They're guessing it's a 5-second penalty, but in the end, so this was way after the race, like an hour after, the conclusion was that George and Lando both got fined $5,000 and each got a reprimand, and you're allowed 5 reprimands a season, with the final one resulting in a 5-place grid penalty. Yuki and Liam, however, determined to have been influenced by the 2 drivers ahead and escaped any repercussions. Feels like a weird like drug thing, like, you know, like these were influenced to try drugs, so they don't deserve any punishment, but the people who influenced them to try drugs, they deserve to be punished. Anyway, another thing that happened during the aborted start, I know we're just on the aborted start, it's been like 10 minutes. Mercedes has been noted for lowering the tire pressure during the aborted start when like all the mechanics came out, and it was to both cars. And in conclusion, both Mercedes received 2 separate $5,000 fines, and normally this results in disqualification, but somehow Mercedes ended up arguing that due to the layout of this track, it's impossible to change the pressure before the wheels are fitted, which is what's required, and unlike other venues, obviously the layout impacts, which seems like a reasonable argument if anyone else had done that. Like what, or if they had done that at the beginning, like before the start, and like they had to put on the tires and then fix the pressure, which you're supposed to fix the pressure before you put on the tires. I don't know why they're the only team to have done it during the start. That's weird. And that it got dismissed, also weird, but it did. So moving on. During the start, the actual start, Russell overtook Lando, classic. I really hope next season, as much as Lando annoys me, I need him to be a title contender, like officially. I need him to get his shit together. He needs to have the mindset of a champion. He needs to get his starts in order because like, sir, you're like the only person who doesn't know how to start. Like it's getting embarrassing at this point, but like that's like a serious concern that out of all the P1 positions he's held, he's only had one converted to maintaining the lead after the first lap. In fact, I'm pretty sure he rarely makes it out of like the first 2 corners. And that's like, that's important. That's important stuff. And while they're in the front, like George overtaking Lando, behind them, Yuki is defending 3rd position against Ocon and Liam, which he successfully does. Charles, though, during this battle is able to squeeze forward to 5th. Somewhere in the back, Alonso and Oscar are battling. Then Checo spins out and drops down to P18. And the commentators are really trying to find the reason why this has happened. And then they like conclude with like, he just did that on his own. And then Lewis and Max are making up like a million spots before the second lap has even happened. I think Max overtook like 8 cars before the end of the first lap. And then he overtook Lewis before the first corner of the second lap. That's insane. That's literally insane behavior. We'll talk more about how Max literally dominated. It was like AI was controlling him. Like it was a flawless race in like the absolute worst conditions. And it's super impressive. It's so impressive. And I just don't have enough, I don't have the words to describe the way Max performed during this time. Anyway, in between the start and the next big incident, by the way, I'm going through this whole thing in chronological order because there's actually no other way to talk about it. In fact, I'm not convinced this is the best way to talk about it, but there was so much that happened. I like can't jump around. I'm just gonna go for it. So in between the start and the next big incident, there was a collision between Ollie and Franco, but both came out unscathed. Later down in the race, Ollie ended up getting a 10-second penalty. Okay. Ta-da! Pau de queijo. Brazilian cheese bread. I'm gonna let it cool down before I try one. Whoa. All right. So when Ollie was informed that he got a 10-second penalty for causing a collision with Franco, he literally went, why? He's lost no time. And I've seen it both ways. Like obviously rules are rules. It's not really about what ends up happening because of your rule break. It's about the fact that you broke the rule. But at the same time, literally nothing happened to Franco because of this collision. So who knows? I'm gonna mention a few of the like people going off track and everything, but like there's literally no way I could get them all because so many things happened. So many like swerves and off track things and like partial yellow flags. Like they flashed and they're gone. Like anyway, Lewis went off track causing yellows, but he did come back on track. And just in general, Lewis has had like a terrible race. He's had a terrible weekend in general. Nothing's really going his way. The car is really messed up. I'm not really sure how they were able to get the setup that bad between him and George. Although I guess you could say the same for Max and Checo, but like I'm not really sure that's comparable. There was an amazing moment where Lewis had a battle with Franco and he defended for a bit, but then Franco ended up overtaking him and the crowds literally went insane. I went insane because what a move by Will Franco, who's obsessed with Lewis, and like to overtake your hero, what a moment. I'm gonna take a moment to talk about some of Max's overtakes because literally crazy. Liam let Max sail through past him and just like did not give him the same energy he gives Checo, which is hilarious to me because I don't think he was given team orders to let Max through. I just think he's not as aggravated by Max, and Checo is really like pushing his buttons. I don't know why he has this beef with Checo, but And then Max came up to Oscar and he overtook him starting so far back. It seemed like Oscar didn't even know he was there. Like he was just not there 1 second. The next second he was in front of him. It was like actually crazy. It was like magic. Some people were saying that it was like Oscar just let him through, but I didn't see it that way. It kind of more felt just like Max took him by surprise, and based on the post-race press conference, media pen interviews and stuff, it kind of seemed like Max broke super late and there was literally nothing Oscar could do, specifically in the wet. If there was dry conditions, he probably would have been able to defend a bit better. But considering it was so wet, it just showed Max's superiority in the wet compared to everyone else, especially rookie. Like this is Oscar's like second time. He's never probably raced an F1 car in these specific conditions before. Okay, I'm gonna try one. Oh, hot. Oh my God, it's so good. Max also tried to overtake Charles and he's so close. And this was probably one of the most even battles that Max experienced today or on Sunday. And like all those like interviews that Max gave when he was asked about, that Charles gave when he was asked about Max and Lando, he was like, I've raced Max. I know how Max races. I know how to defend against him. And today we literally saw that in action. Charles literally know how Max thinks and he's able to defend against him. Obviously Max ended up overtaking him because there was no defeating Max today, but it was great to watch. And also, wow, this is so good. In the cool down room, when they're watching Max's overtake on Charles, he's like, this was the hardest part because, actually Charles is quite decent. And I know it was a compliment, but the way it came out made it sound like, first of all, he was insulting everyone else in the grid. And also being like, wow, Charles is quite decent when we all know he knows how good Charles is. It was just really funny. But I just need Lando to take note of how Charles is behaving and how he fights Max because he really needs to start learning it. He said in an interview that like he's not the one who needs to change how he races. Max needs to. And like, let's be honest, he needs to change how he races. You're going up against an almost 4-time world champion, you're doing something wrong. And then Carlos went off track. It was starting to rain super hard. Carlos went off track while he was in like P6 and came out P15 because it's like such heavy rain. And then Charles was the first one to pit for intermediates. Again, he replaces his intermediates with intermediates. And he comes out P13, which is not great. And these conditions are really complicated because like, they're not necessarily calling for full wets, but they're worse than inters. And I think even the drivers were saying that even if we had switched to full wets, that wouldn't have guaranteed us, that wouldn't have protected us from the conditions that we were in. So then we got a virtual safety car. And this is because Nico has beached himself on the banking and he was pushed back out by the marshals. That's not allowed. You can't have external help to get back into the race. He got shown the black flag, but he didn't seem to really realize it until he was back in the garage during the red flag. The black flag generally the black flag is for disqualification, but according to the rules, it's generally not shown during the race. It's shown after the race, and the disqualifications applied after the race. So Will Buxton, after doing the post-race show, was like, it's a little weird that got shown and enforced in the middle of the race. But basically, the virtual safety car triggered a bunch of stops. Checo's the only one to put on wets during this, which didn't end up being a terrible decision, but didn't end up being a good one either. Lando and George ended up waiting until the very end and came into pit just as the virtual safety car was ending, which made them come out instead of first and second, it made them come out fourth and fifth. So during this time, Lando had been begging to come in for the last few laps. And the response he got is, for what reason? And he goes, I need the box. He gets told by his engineer that like, well, Charles boxed and he's in traffic, as if that's proof why he shouldn't box, which it was. He shouldn't box at that time. George, on the other hand, was angry that he got brought in when he was brought in. As the commentators put it, he was on the verge of discovery. I don't know what he was about to discover, but he was on the verge of it. Basically, both George and Lando fucked up because they decided to pit right before the VSC ended, which means not only did they lose track position, right afterwards there was a red flag, which means everyone basically got a free pit stop again. So it just like was really shitty. Between the next safety car and the red flag and the virtual safety car, Oscar ends up getting a 10-second penalty for causing a collision with Liam Lawson. So then we get a safety car. And when they issued a safety car, I was so fucking confused watching this because I thought the safety car was like a progression from the virtual safety car. I thought it was related to Nico and was like, wait, he rejoined, didn't he? Oh, wait, he DNF'd. No, he rejoined. Wait, why is there a safety car anyway? Like, I don't understand. And then like during this time, that we kept getting like noted by the stewards notices coming in on the screen, and I was getting super confused because everything was being noted for causing collisions, and I just like didn't see that many collisions for the amount of notices that were coming in. And basically the safety car was for poor weather conditions, and it was like getting so bad that they needed to like follow a safety car they didn't want to do a red flag, but they needed the cars to like slow down until the rain cooled down, so they issued a safety car. Regardless of what they wanted or not, Franco Colapinto ended up causing a red flag because he ended up in the wall, and I felt so bad for him. But I also feel bad for me because it was like deeply overwhelming. I didn't understand what was going on. There was a virtual safety car, then there was a safety car, then there was a red flag. None of them were connected. They were just all separate incidents, but it all happened within like less than 10 laps. And by the time we got a red flag, less than half of the race had gone by. And I'm just like so confused while I'm watching this. But basically, I was overwhelmed. I can only imagine how the drivers are feeling, but I personally was overwhelmed watching, and I couldn't handle it. It was too much at once. But anyway, the red flag happened because little poor baby Franco crashed. He just seemed to like lose the car in the like terrible conditions. It's not been a good weekend for him or Williams. Not only did he crash in quali, he crashed during the race, and then he ended up losing a place in the Constructors' Championship because Alpine did so well. And then trying to catch up to the field on cold tires is what ended up like actually causing him to do a big oversteer and then caused him to do like an overcorrection, and then he ended up straight in the wall. It was really sad. But it was a productive red flag because Ted was on and he was saying how Nico looked really comfortable and chill during the red flag. He's like, I don't want to be the one to tell him that he's disqualified. So Nico found out he was disqualified during the red flag, which means he had rejoined the race, which at that point I was very confused about. He had rejoined the race, but because he was helped onto the track by the marshals, that was an immediate disqualification. And then we also had Oscar apologized to Liam for causing the collision with him. That earned him a 10-second penalty. We had like a moment to collect ourselves regarding the drivers and everything that had transpired with less than half the race completed. Like, it was overwhelming to watch. Like, I've had like a day to process this, and I just haven't processed this. But like, all the drivers were complaining aggressively. George said, fuck, I don't know why I'm floating on these straights. Literally every corner, the tires are not on the ground. I'm literally a boat. Then Oscar said, I can't race like this on these tires. Either we need to put the wets on or they need to stop the race, or both. Which, by the way, is the first time I've ever heard Oscar complain about anything. Like, he rarely responds on the radio, let alone like initiates a message, and it's rarely a complaint. So that was crazy. But I do want to note my favorite part about a red flag during a wet race, or just like a wet race in general, is when they wipe the driver's feet before getting in the car. It just seems so unnecessary and posh. Like, I get it. Like, they can't have the pedal, the foot being wet going on the pedal, but it just looks hilarious. It looks so funny because the driver seems so like over the top and snobby. Anyway, we go back into the race with a rolling start. Before that happens, like following a safety car, and then it's a rolling start. Before that happens, Lando gets told there might be a class 1 or class 2 rain for the first 10 minutes, and then nothing. And the commentator goes, in McLaren speak, that's a light drizzle. Which made me laugh. Once we officially restart, there's suddenly a Sauber in the grass, and there's a Haas in the grass, and then there's a yellow flag, but everyone's able to get back on track, so everything keeps going. Lando ends up going wide off track and joins just ahead of George, but then George overtakes Lando, and it's back to 4th and 5th. Then Charles goes wide and then he goes back on. Ollie keeps going off track. Like, this all sounds like a random collection of events, but I don't even know how to tell you this in any other capacity. Ollie spun out. Basically, Ollie made a lot of mistakes during this race, which is understandable. This is his first wet race in an F1 car. It's like a lot. It was a lot to watch. Again, I don't know what it was like to drive, but I can't imagine it was a pleasant experience. But Ollie just kept making mistakes. He just kept going off track. Nearly every yellow flag was just Ollie. Impressive that he finished the race because he caused many yellow flags. He spun out into the wall. He's trying to back out back into the track. I don't even know how he's still on track, but he needs another new front wing. He's already had one replaced. My notes literally say, I am overwhelmed. And reciting this back, I'm still overwhelmed. This is not the best analysis, but like, it's almost like there's nothing to analyze. There's just like me recounting what happened because it was crazy. Because then, not even like a couple laps later, we have another safety car because Carlos is in the wall. After the race, he had to go see the stewards because I believe his car also got touched by the marshals, which is not allowed. Like, he was in the wall. He tried to re-enter. The marshals tried to help him like get out of the car and everything, but he was trying to reattach his steering wheel so that he could re-enter the race. But because the marshals had touched his car, he couldn't re-enter the race. I don't even know if his car was in a position to re-enter the race, but he was certainly trying. And I kind of feel like the problem is the marshals. Like, all of this stuff is happening because the marshals keep touching the car. Maybe the marshals should wait to touch the car. I don't know. Or if the drivers are just being over ambitious. I'm not really sure what's happening, but like, it keeps coming down to the marshals touching the car. So I don't know. But right before all of this happened, like right as we restarted, Carlos gave a bizarre radio message at the restart, which was also like very funny. He basically went, Ricky, these are not new inters. Oh, which inters are these? Hello? I literally couldn't stop laughing. It was such a funny radio message. The hello at the end literally killed me. I think there must have been an issue in the transmission for the radio, because I don't think he got a response, but he was like, what the fuck are these inters? Like, there is a problem. And then immediately he crashed. I don't know if it was because of the inters or if there was another issue, but I'm not letting it slide. Ricky, why did he have random inters on his car? No one knows. Also love that he could feel it. He's like Princess and the Pea. He's like, oh, these inters are used. These inters have been touched by another person and I cannot lay on them. This must end. Literally, Carlos is Princess and the Pea when it comes to his inters. And you know what? He was right because he crashed and DNF'd. All right, so the rest of the race. At the restart, after the safety car caused by Carlos's crash, Max literally bursts forward and overtakes Ocon. He had no shot. Ocon had absolutely no shot at staying ahead. Max was just so good. They were asked about it in the post-race press conference, and Max was like, I just had an opportunity, and I was like really lucky that Ocon behaved appropriately during this attempt at an overtake. And Ocon was like, it was a cool move. Like, what was I gonna do? It was wet. I'm not gonna like defend it that aggressively. Like, it was a cool move. And then there was like a bunch of sliding and like going wide. Like, Lando goes wide, drops down to 7th. And then Oscar had to swap with him so that Lando ended up in 6th. Basically, none of the positions Lando ended up with this weekend were earned. At one point, Lando gets a super weird radio reminding him of Oscar's penalty. It was basically like, just so you know, Oscar has a 10-second penalty, so try to get as close to George as possible. And Lando's like, what do you think I'm doing? I'm going as fast as I can. Which, honestly, I give a lot of shit to Lando for his radio messages and for being sassy and unnecessarily, not like funny sassy, but just like being rude almost. I get it. Like, if I was told to just go faster, like, what was he doing? Going slow? Like, obviously he's trying to catch George as fast as he can. Oscar ended up sliding, but still fought off Yuki, who was really trying to regain his way back to the position he lost. He wasn't even close, but he had a good race. Charles ends up going wide and then ends up getting noted for re-entering the track unsafely, but like what could he do? And then he didn't actually get any penalty for it. Checo had contact with Liam. There was no action for it, but lol that Checo once again had contact with Liam. Checo fucking hates Liam. I don't know how Liam has gained such a negative reputation with the older drivers this fast, but you know, here we are. Max ended up finishing with like 20 seconds ahead of everyone else. Ocon's radio was ecstatic. I'm pretty sure at one point he went, I won the race, which it kind of felt like he did, honestly. He was like ecstatic. Truly, I don't know any other words to describe it. They didn't play Pierre's, but I'm sure Pierre was equally as happy. Get into them in a moment. And it was so good to hear Max's radio, which was like, you know what that was? Pause. That was Simply Lovely. What an icon. And it wasn't simply lovely. It was very complicatedly lovely. Like, that was not an easy drive. That was not an easy win. He fought every step of the way. And my God, like it's like the FIA lit a fire under his ass. Like, I don't know what happened. I don't know how he because he's generally driving above the car's ability, but like the way he drove this race, I'm not sure even half of the grid would be able to accomplish that in the best of circumstances. If nothing else got in the way, I don't even think they'd be able to accomplish it. And he didn't let the rain get in his way. He didn't let, how much did he make? P17 17 drivers get in his way. He didn't let safety cars and red flags and yellow flags and virtual safety cars get in his way. He overtook every single thing flawlessly. He didn't lock up a single fucking time. A single time he didn't lock up. That's insane. That's like not natural. He's like not human. The way he drove today was actually exceptional, and he deserves every kudos. And basically, like, anyone who's against Max Verstappen is had a really tough weekend, because there is literally no denying how good of a driver he is. It's not just luck. And I do want to mention this. I think Lando said in an interview, he was asked about his the poor timing of his stop and the virtual safety car, and he was like, you know what? It's luck. Like, the red flag, like all of this, like it's just luck. Like sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And everyone sort of like took that quote, unless I'm quoting the wrong thing, but from what I understood, it was that quote, and people are applying it to the situation with Max Verstappen, and that's just like, that can't be done, because, I mean, it can be done, but I don't actually think that's what Lando was referring to. He wasn't saying that Max won by luck. Not a single driver on the grid believes that Max won by luck. Max won by pure skill and talent. Luck helped. It was lucky that the team had good strategy. It was lucky that whatever, he was in a good mindset. He won that race with his pure talent and his skill and his brain. He just did. So let's do a quick overview of all the incidents. So the weather and like all the little random incidents, the weather was insane. People were like flying off track half the race, to the point where I've just like lost how many people ran wide or almost at the barriers, or like were issued like a 2-second yellow flag. Like there was just so many. It was just so wet. It was so wet, and the visibility was so bad. Like they just kept saying that it was basically a lake. This is also the most I've ever heard the drivers complain. Like I heard Oscar complain for the first time ever. During the red flag, there was like a clip of Max yelling at his father and Helmut about how could anyone expect them to possibly drive in these conditions, like how unsafe it is. Poor Franco and Ollie experienced their first like absolute monstrosity of a wet race for the first time. And there was another issue that was actually not weather related, but we heard quite a bit about the bumpiness of the track, and the roads had just been resurfaced from last year, which should have made the track smoother and easier to drive on, but instead it kind of made it worse. I don't know what they did, but the bumpiness probably would have been significantly worse had they been racing in like dry conditions, like at full speed. Towards the end of the race, Fernando got on the radio and said, I will finish the race today for the mechanics, but they did an exceptional job today, but my back really hurts. The bouncing is not normal. And like his voice broke halfway through that radio call. Like he definitely was in a lot of pain. And then there was the video of him getting out of his car and like he needed help with 2 mechanics. Like he could barely get out. And he's old, but like that doesn't really matter because like he might feel the back pain a bit worse. I think him and Lewis were the main complainers about the back pain because they're the oldest, but like all the drivers were saying it was way too bumpy and they need to fix it. But I did like that Max said during the post-race press conference that he didn't want anything he's saying to be taken against the people who smooth out the track because he knows they work really hard and try their best and it's really not on them. It just didn't necessarily work with their cars, which I think was really sweet of him to point out. People give him so much shit, but he's actually a very nice person. All right, so just to recap all the penalties that happened, because there were a lot. The pre-race incidents, which were concluded post-race, was that Mercedes lowered the tire pressure during the aborted start, which earned them 2 separate $5,000 fines. The breaching of the aborted start procedure resulted in a $5,000 fine for both Lando and George. Liam and Yuki were spared because they were considered to just have been influenced. Ollie Bierman got a 10-second penalty for causing a collision with Franco. Oscar got a 10-second penalty for causing a collision with Liam Lawson. Charles was noted for an unsafe return to track, but was not penalized for it. Carlos was noted for an attempted return to track after the marshals had already begun to help him, but he just got a reprimand and not a penalty. Nico got a disqualification for getting help to get back on track and continuing the race. One thing I noticed is that a lot of the penalties that happened during this race were 10-second penalties. Actually, I think all of them were. And I know last week we were all talking about how it's super weird that the things that Max did earned a 5-second penalty, but he was getting a 10-second penalty, like earned a 5-second penalty in the past, but he was getting a 10-second penalty. And I almost feel like the Max punishments were the beginning of the new era of how they punish this stuff, because everyone got 10-second penalties this time and it used to be just 5-second penalties, so it was a bit crazy to get some, but maybe it was because it was dangerous conditions, I don't know, but there were a lot of 10-second penalties. Recap of the DNFs. Alex did not start, Lance did not start, but I'm listing it in the order that it happened, but Lance is actually below Alex in qualification since he got through half of a formation lap. Nico DNF'd and was disqualified. Colapinto DNF'd. Carlos DNF'd. Oh my God. Okay, so after the race, the Alpines tugged at my heartstrings. I've been kind of crying every time I see a clip for the last 24 hours. The side-by-side of them driving in the last lap was so cute. I cried then. And then when Pierre and Ocon hugged, so Ocon ran to hug the engineers and then Pierre ran to hug the engineers and they looked at each other and they both paused and leaned back and then they shook hands and they clapped hands and they hugged each other, and it was equally initiated and was so wholesome and it was so sweet. And all their media pen interviews, they were just looking at each other like they were in love, and it's I feel like we healed something today. I feel like we fixed a forever broken friendship that we never thought would be fixed. And it still makes me tear up to think about all we needed was them to be on a podium together. And whatever the guy's name who runs Alpino, kudos to you. Kudos. I wish you had done this earlier in the year, and I wish that you had done it before Ocon had to leave. As happy as I am that Jack Doohan's getting a chance, I feel like this was a breaking point for Esteban and Pierre, and I almost feel like their relationship could have been mended. And I actually feel like the P2, P3 was a bit more of an equal ground for them to bond over. Also, there was no one commented about this. I don't know if I'm the only one to notice, and if I assume nothing came from it, but there was a very aggressive conversation between Alpine engineers and the FIA. I assume it's the FIA because they're wearing a dress shirt and a vest, and that's their go-to fit. But they were arguing with each other. I don't know if they breached some sort of park firm whatever, but I think we would have heard about it. But they were in very deep conversation. There were just great vibes all around. Max, the way he leaped into his engineer's arms, into the team's arms, was so wholesome. The cool down room was one of the best cool down rooms we've seen in a long time. I almost feel like Pierre and Esteban have been just fans all year, and they're wow, this is the room that we're in. And they were just engaged and ready and thrilled to be Max's podcast guests. They were ready to go. They were ready to discuss everything on screen. They just kept asking Max questions so he could fill in, like, answer, and like they knew their job and they did beautifully. It was one of the least awkward and most happy cool down rooms we've ever seen. The funniest point, there were a couple of funny moments, but Max saying when he was trying to overtake Charles, he said, he's actually quite decent. Literally kills me because, first of all, it's like a backwards compliment to Charles. It's definitely insulting like half the grid. I know he didn't mean it that way, but that's how it came off. And then at one point when they were watching Max overtake Esteban, Max goes, you were fast. And Esteban goes, I was scared of you. It was really funny. And then the podium, guys, I cannot lie. I was so happy to hear the Dutch national anthem again. It's been so long. It's been since the Spanish Grand Prix. It's been like over 100, I think it was like 163 days or something. It was a wild amount of days. I really miss the Dutch national anthem, and it's the only one I have memorized. No, I can't do it. But like when I hear it, I just feel at peace. In the post-race conference, it was actually really cute. Esteban and Pierre were asked about like what this means for their relationship. And they actually said it during the media pet as well. They said that they're not going to discuss their relationship with the general public because it's between themselves. And then in the post-race press conference, what made me tear up, I was actually sobbing low-key. But what made me tear up was Esteban saying that of everything that happened that day, he's most proud of his relationship with Pierre, and how the last lap when they were side by side gave him a flashback of them as, oh my God, of them as children, like training, because they both said that they used to go to the track together in the like dead of winter in the freezing cold to learn how to drive in the wet and the snow, and it was just them two on track. And like they like remembered how they used to like run to the car to heat up before going back out on track. And Pierre was like, our relationship is our own, but this is extra special because we trained for these conditions together. We learned how to battle in these conditions together, and here we are on the podium together. And like later, Max was asked about competing in these conditions. He's like, everyone who was good during karting in these conditions is good now. Like, I remember how brilliant both Esteban and Pierre were in karting during these conditions, and obviously it shows us why we're both here together. And it just really makes me so happy to like, because there's like an extra level of it. Like, it's not just any double podium. It's like, it like gave them both like memories of their childhood, like learning how to race in these conditions together, and here they won together. And it's just really wholesome. I've never seen them so happy and so excited to be in each other's presence. And I really feel like we healed something. We healed something in F1, and maybe it's good they won't be teammates next year because there's no chance to ruin it. And they're like leaving on a high, but it really was a great story to go out with for the weekend. Jesus fucking Christ. Okay. The driver of the day was Max. I have zero arguments here. I don't even have an honorable mention argument because there were other good moves and decent drives. Nothing really compares to Max's literally flawless performance from P17 to P1 after such a major like dry spell in winning. He made literally zero mistakes, and there were countless external factors that could have fucked him up. So many factors could have gotten in his way. Every other driver made a mistake. There wasn't a single driver on the grid who didn't make a mistake, bar Max. He made zero. So he not only is this the drive of the day, I think it might be the drive of the day, the drive of the decade. It might actually be the drive of the history of F1. Like it was actually flawless and no notes, not a single mistake. And of course, the other driver of the day is Pierre's and Esteban's relationship. Dick in the box, the rain, like I don't really know. This might be the longest list of investigations and most like varied list of investigations that the FIA has ever had. Not verified, that's just me guessing, but like it was a ridiculous list of investigations, and they were so different every time. The whole race was honestly chaotic, and it was almost too hard to pinpoint a specific dick in the box. There was no singular villain. It was just a literal mess from before the lights even went out. that like there isn't one dick. It was just a lot of little dicks. A lot of little dicks in Brazil. So the final results are Max, Esteban, Pierre, George, Charles, Lando, Yuki, Oscar, Liam, Lewis, Checo, Ollie, Bottas, Alonso, and Joe, with Carlos and Colapinto DNFing, Nico DNFing and being disqualified, followed by Albon and Stroll. The standings are Max with 393 points, Lando with 331, Charles with 307, Oscar with 262, Carlos with 244, George with 192, Lewis 190, Checo with 151, Alonso with 62, Nico with 31, Tsunoda with 28, Gasly with 26, Stroll with 24, Ocon with 23, Kevin with 14, Alex with 12, Daniel with 12, Ollie with 7, Franco with 5, Liam with 4, and Guan Yu, Logan, and Valtteri with 0. One thing to note, Pierre and Ocon standings haven't changed, but points have definitely gone up. And Lando was much further away from winning the World Drivers' Championship. There are 62 points apart between them, so it is very, very unlikely for Lando to catch up unless something insane happens. Basically, Max can secure the championship in Vegas, depending on what happens. The constructors is as follows: McLaren with 593 points, Ferrari with 557, Red Bull with 544, Mercedes with 382, Aston Martin with 86, Alpine with 49, Haas with 46, RB with 44, Williams with 17, and Kick Sauber with 0. Given how Checo has been performing, there's like very little chance that Red Bull ends up taking the Constructors' Championship. So I really think it's between McLaren and Ferrari. So that's it for the Brazilian Grand Prix. Next up is Las Vegas. And I'm praying for all our sakes it's dry and like boring as fuck, because it's going to take at least 2 weeks to recover from this chaotic mess. Like, make sure you follow at BoxBoxF1Pod on social to keep up in between races. And as usual, make sure you subscribe, review, and share with any potential boxes. All of my inboxes are open on email, in DMs, wherever you want to reach out with any news, content I might have missed, or just questions or thoughts. See you in Vegas. Box.